There is a city on Earth that was once richer than entire Roman provinces, that could not survive a single day without water, and that sits in one of the driest deserts on the planet, and yet it thrived for 600 years. Its builders solved a problem modern engineers still study with astonishment. And when that civilization finally went silent, it did not just decline, it vanished so completely that for over 1,000 years, most of the outside world had no idea it had ever existed at all. No war destroyed it, no enemy army burned it to the ground. It simply disappeared from memory, hidden behind a crack in a mountain so narrow that sunlight barely reaches the ground at midday. This is the story of the Nabataeans, the desert traders who built one of the ancient world's most advanced cities and then let the world forget it was ever there. So let's talk about the Nabataeans. Picture the Arabian desert 2,500 years ago. No cities, no borders, just an ocean of sand and rock stretching between the great civilizations of the ancient world. A corridor almost nobody wanted to control because almost nobody could survive in it. Assyrian kings marched armies along its edges and turned back. Babylonian scribes wrote about the desert tribes who moved through it like ghosts, impossible to catch because there was nothing to catch, only tents that vanished before an army arrived. Then Alexander the Great tore through the region, died young, and left his generals to rip his empire apart, fighting each other. In that chaos, something strange happened. A loose confederation of nomads who called themselves the Nabatu made a decision that should not have worked. Instead of raiding the incense caravans crossing their territory the way every other desert people did, they decided to protect them instead. Why would raiders suddenly become guardians? Because they had discovered something almost nobody else understood. In a desert where the difference between life and death was knowing where the next well was hidden, water was worth more than gold. Merchants who once dreaded crossing Nabatean territory began paying willingly for safe passage, guides, and guaranteed water along routes that had killed careless travelers for generations. And they were about to turn that secret into an empire. But first, that empire nearly died in its cradle, in a siege almost nobody remembers today.
Here is what almost nobody knows about the birth of the Nabatean kingdom. It very nearly ended before it began, in a siege that should have wiped them off the map entirely. By the 4th century BCE, the Nabateans controlled the flow of frankincense and myrrh moving north from Arabia, and their growing wealth had caught the attention of dangerous men. In 312 BCE, the Macedonian general Antigonus, one of Alexander's own former commanders, decided this desert people looked like easy plunder. He sent his son Demetrius with an army to their mountain stronghold, confident he was about to crush a nation of tent dwellers. What he found instead was chilling. The Nabatean fighters and much of the treasure were gone, away at a trade gathering, leaving behind only the old, the young, and the women to defend the rock. A slaughter should have followed. Instead, something happened that Demetrius never expected. Unable to break through a natural fortress and unwilling to massacre defenseless civilians, his army negotiated a withdrawal and left empty-handed, taking hostages and a fortune in silver as a face-saving consolation prize instead of the conquest he had promised his father. Furious, Antigonus sent a second army back within weeks to finish the job properly. That army walked into the desert at night and was never seen again, ambushed and annihilated almost to the last man by an enemy that understood the terrain better than any invader ever could. The message was unmistakable. This was not a people you could conquer by force. But surviving an invasion is one thing. Building an empire out of sand and stone is another. And what the Nabateans did next would leave archaeologists baffled for centuries. If you want to understand how strange the Nabatean achievement really is, consider this.
They built one of the greatest cities of the ancient world in a location that should have made a city physically impossible. Petra, their capital, rose out of solid sandstone in what is now southern Jordan, reachable only through a narrow, mile-long crack in the rock called the Siq, in places barely wide enough for a handful of people to walk through side by side. Any army foolish enough to march down that corridor would be trapped and exposed to defenders positioned on the cliffs above. But the deeper mystery is water. Petra sits in one of the driest regions on the planet, with no permanent river and almost no natural water source, and yet the Nabateans supported a population in the tens of thousands, complete with ornamental pools and gardens in the middle of the desert. How? They built an invisible city beneath the visible one. Dams, cisterns, and a network of ceramic pipes running for kilometers through solid rock, engineered with such precise gradients that modern hydraulic engineers, examining the remains centuries later, have struggled to explain how a civilization with almost no surviving written theory achieved this level of precision. Every flash flood that roared through the surrounding canyons, capable of drowning careless travelers within minutes, capable of turning a dry riverbed into a wall of water without warning, was captured, tamed, and turned into the lifeblood of an entire kingdom. And that engineering triumph was only the beginning of what made Petra one of the wealthiest cities on Earth. What exactly were they hiding behind that rock, and how far did their fortune actually reach?
The answer is almost unbelievable. At its height, the Nabataean kingdom controlled roughly 2,000 kilometers of trade routes, funneling the most valuable luxury commodity in the ancient world, incense, from the southern tip of Arabia all the way to the Mediterranean coast. A single caravan crossing that distance could take 2 months and carry cargo worth a fortune through terrain where one wrong guess about the next water source meant death for everyone involved. Loaded camels moved in lines that could stretch for miles, guarded by armed escorts who knew every hidden well and every stretch of open ground where bandits might strike, and merchants entrusted their entire fortunes to guides whose names history never bothered to record. The Nabateans made themselves impossible to bypass, running way stations, charging tolls, and providing armed escorts through the deadliest stretches of desert. And merchants paid without complaint because the alternative was crossing that landscape blind. This is roughly the ancient equivalent of controlling the modern shipping lanes that move the world's oil, and it turned Petra into a showcase of unimaginable wealth. That wealth carved the monument the world now recognizes even when it does not know the name behind it. A towering tomb facade cut directly into a cliff of rose-colored stone, its columns and pediments not built but carved from solid rock from the top down, meaning a single miscalculation partway through could ruin the entire monument with no way to fix it, no scaffolding to rebuild from, no second attempt possible once the chisel had gone too deep. Today, the world calls it the Treasury, though it was never a treasury at all, but the tomb of a king, its true purpose forgotten so completely that local legend for centuries claimed a pharaoh had hidden treasure inside the stone urn carved above its entrance, an urn still scarred today by generations of hopeful bullet holes fired by people who believed the legend was real. Under rulers like Aretas IV, who reigned for nearly 50 years, the kingdom minted its own coins, built temples and theaters that rivaled the Hellenistic world, and negotiated as an equal with Rome, Judea, and Egypt. Aretas IV's own daughter married Herod Antipas, the same Herod who later humiliated her by divorcing her for Herodias, sparking a war between two kingdoms. Beyond the palaces and tombs, ordinary Nabataean life held its own quiet strangeness. They worshipped a chief god named Dushara, represented not by a human statue, but a plain rectangular block of stone, a deliberate rejection of the elaborate god images found across the rest of the Hellenistic world. Their potters produced something called eggshell ware, bowls thrown so thin they were almost translucent, decorated with delicate painted leaves, a level of craftsmanship so refined that some pieces are barely thicker than a modern eggshell, yet somehow survived intact for 2,000 years buried in the sand. And their engineers did not stop at water. They terraced entire hillsides for agriculture in a region most people assumed could never grow anything, turning captured floodwater into orchards and vineyards in the middle of the desert. But hidden inside this golden age lies the strangest twist in the entire Nabatean story, the moment that turns this from an impressive ancient kingdom into one of history's genuine unsolved mysteries.
Here is the mystery that should make your skin crawl. One of the richest, most advanced cities of the ancient world simply vanished from human memory for over 1,000 years, and nobody agrees on exactly why. Petra did not fall in a single dramatic siege recorded by ancient historians. There was no burning library, no sacked capital watched by the world in horror. Instead, it faded, and even now scholars argue about what actually killed it. Sea trade through the Red Sea began stealing business from the overland caravan routes the Nabataeans had guarded for centuries. A catastrophic earthquake struck in 363 CE, tearing through the city's infrastructure, and the elaborate water system that had kept Petra alive for 600 years fell into ruin as the people who understood how to maintain it scattered or died out. Slowly, the city that had once controlled the wealth of the incense trade emptied out, and then something even stranger happened. The outside world simply forgot it had ever existed. Local Bedouin tribes never forgot. They lived among the ruins, drew water from ancient cisterns, told stories about the carved facades passed down through generations. But for Europe, for mapmakers and scholars, Petra became a rumor, a half-remembered name in ancient texts with no confirmed location on any map. It took until 1812, 13 centuries after Petra's decline began, for a Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, disguised as a Muslim scholar and traveling under a false name, to talk his way past suspicious local guides who had every reason not to trust him, claiming he wanted to make a sacrifice at a nearby tomb. He knew that if his guides suspected he was really hunting for treasure or plotting to loot the ruins, they would likely kill him on the spot and leave his body in the desert. So every step through that narrow gorge was a calculated risk with his own life on the line. Picture the moment he stepped through that narrow crack in the rock, unsure whether the legends were even true, his guides watching him closely for any sign that his story was a lie, and the canyon suddenly opened to reveal an entire carved civilization, sitting exactly as it had for 2,000 years, waiting in silence. What could make a civilization this wealthy, this advanced, disappear so completely that the world had to rediscover it like a secret? The cracks had actually begun forming centuries before that earthquake ever struck. Long before the ground shook in 363 CE, the Nabataean kingdom was already being hollowed out from the inside, and almost nobody watching at the time seemed to notice how deep the damage went. As Rome expanded its grip across the eastern Mediterranean through the 1st century BCE, annexing Egypt, then Syria, then pressing further into the Levant, the Nabataeans found themselves squeezed tighter with every passing decade. King Aretas IV had held the kingdom together through decades of careful diplomacy, paying tribute when necessary, avoiding direct confrontation with Rome. But diplomacy only delays a decline, it does not stop one. The insult to his daughter did not stay a family matter. Aretas IV went to war against Herod Antipas over the humiliation and crushed his former son-in-law's army so thoroughly that some Roman observers reportedly saw it as divine punishment for Herod's betrayal, a rare moment when Nabatean military power was put on full, unmistakable display for the entire region to see. Yet even a battlefield victory could not fix what was already breaking underneath. Even the New Testament carries a strange echo of how Nabatea had become entangled in the region's political chaos. The Apostle Paul describes being lowered over a city wall in a basket at night to escape agents acting under the authority of a Nabataean king, a small biblical detail that reveals just how deep this desert kingdom's fingers reached into the upheavals, reshaping the ancient world. Meanwhile, the very foundation of Nabataean wealth was quietly eroding. Sailors in Roman Egypt discovered they could ride seasonal monsoon winds directly across the Arabian Sea between India and the Red Sea, a maritime shortcut that made the overland incense route increasingly unnecessary. Every successful sea crossing was a caravan that no longer needed Nabataean water, Nabataean guides, or Nabataean protection. By the time the kingdom's final ruler, Rebel II, took the throne in the late 1st century CE, the once mighty Nabatea was a shadow of what it had been under Aretas IV, and Rome was watching, patiently waiting for the moment to take what remained. What would it actually take to finally bring this kingdom down? The answer is almost anticlimactic, and that is exactly what makes it so haunting.
In 10 CE, the end came not with fire and blood, but with paperwork. The Roman Emperor Trajan simply annexed the Nabataean kingdom, folding it into a new province called Arabia Petraea, named for the very capital that had once defied a Macedonian army. There was no last stand at the Seek, no desperate defense of the carved city. The kingdom that had survived assassination attempts, desert ambushes, and centuries of geopolitical pressure ended not in battle, but in quiet administrative absorption. A kingdom too weakened by decades of decline to offer anything more than a formality. For a while, Petra actually kept flourishing under Roman rule, new buildings rising, trade continuing, as though nobody inside the city yet understood how much had already been lost. It was not conquest that finally silenced the city. It was everything that came after: the continued collapse of overland trade, the earthquake of 363 CE that shattered infrastructure beyond easy repair, cracking cisterns that had held for centuries and burying streets under collapsed facades, and the slow, quiet migration of people away from a city that no longer offered any reason to stay. What was lost is almost impossible to measure: an entire civilization's worth of hydraulic engineering, architectural mastery, and cultural memory, reduced to silent stone facades standing empty for over 1,000 years. But what survived might be even more remarkable. Petra's ancient water systems are studied today by engineers searching for solutions to modern water scarcity in the world's driest regions. Proof that a 2,000-year-old desert kingdom may still have something to teach the 21st century. The Nabataeans' own cursive script, born from merchants scribbling receipts for incense shipments, gradually evolved over centuries into the direct ancestor of the Arabic script used by hundreds of millions of people today. Petra itself, named a UNESCO World Heritage Site and voted one of the new 7 wonders of the world, now draws over 1 million visitors a year,
walking through the very same Seek that Burckhardt walked in 1812 and that Nabataean traders walked 2,000 years before him. Every time a film crew uses that famous carved facade as an ancient, mysterious backdrop, millions of people around the world stare at the legacy of the Nabataeans without ever learning their name. The desert people who built one of the ancient world's most advanced hidden cities are gone, but the rock they carved is still standing, still catching the light exactly the way they designed it to, and it is still keeping its secrets. If you made it this far, thank you.
This took a long time to put together, and knowing people are genuinely interested in this history makes it worth it. If this story pulled you in the way it pulled me in while researching it, hit like and consider subscribing, because there are more forgotten, vanished civilizations like this one still waiting to be uncovered. Tell me in the comments which lost empire you want uncovered next, and I'll see you in the next video.